Welcome to Develop Denver. I know you're all taking a lunch hour, so hopefully you're not too hungry and you got a little snack for breakfast and you're ready to talk about onboarding and how to get that as an investment in your company's growth and future. Is my volume okay? Good. Not too up, down. All right, awesome. Sorry, technical difficulties now. Great. I am Genevieve Krzeminski. I'm a senior engineering manager for Quizlet in Denver. Quizlet's mission is to help students and teachers learn and master whatever they are studying. And I'm really excited. I just joined the Denver office in April of this year. And I'm hiring, so if that's something you're looking for, please talk to me later at the conference or sometime today. All right, so I want to poll the audience to start out and ask you how many has started your job in the last year? And keep your hands up if it was the last 6 months. Okay, great. How many of you have been at your job? You can put your hands down. For at least 2 years. Okay, and keep your hands up if that's at least 5 years. Okay, great. Awesome, and then one more question. Show of hands of how many company size greater than 100, if your company is more than 100 people. Right, and how about greater than 200? Awesome, thank you for that, good to know. So today, growth is the theme of the Develop Denver conference, and I'm part of the growth team at Quizlet, and surely the tech community is growing rapidly in Denver, and we're all aware of that, and so it's even more important to focus on things that help that grow in a positive way. So today I'm talking to you about onboarding and onboarding programs and how those can help you grow your organization in a really positive way that is effective for everyone. I'm going to also give you some practical ideas to hopefully help you implement an onboarding program in your company, whether it exists or not, or maybe make improvements, or maybe give you things to think about when looking for a new job about their onboarding program. And that helps. So why should you care about onboarding programs? Well, younger generations are actually more and more expecting to get fired from their first job, as opposed to having a lifelong commitment and staying there for a really long time. The average length of stay at jobs is also becoming shorter. It's more trending towards a 1 to 2 year versus 4 to 5 year, which was more usual. That makes it even more important for companies to double down and really get all they can out of the employees. But it is a two-way street, and it's also important now, ever more important, for companies to invest in the growth of their employees that are there, so that people want to stay and work there and promote the company and get a really great experience. So job satisfaction is directly tied to retention, and you think retention might be something that only HR cares about, but actually it really benefits and affects the company as a whole and other people that you're working with. So HR will appreciate this, but also you and your company will. Hiring is a big job. Getting people just in the door and hired, you're recruiting tech talent in this very competitive market is a challenge. So this is another reason that onboarding and doing it right is really important for your company, so that you can make good on that investment. You wouldn't open a 401k and never contribute to it. Similarly, when you have an employee join your company, you should continue to contribute to their growth from day one. There are problems that might pop up later on when people are leaving that you wouldn't find out until then that they were leaving, and they could have started on day one with how the company kind of brought that person in and integrated them into the culture. So it's really important. Getting people productive faster so they can contribute sooner, contributing to their growth so that they will stay longer, and then also revealing any long-standing issues that your company may have and looking to fix and improve those to continuously improve your company over the long term. Given that the time span is reduced of how long you expect to keep employees, this is why this is even more important. And already we've made a huge investment in the hiring process. It's really expensive to bring on new employees, so you want to make sure you're making good on that investment. So now I'm going to talk you through a little story example of my made-up character, Ben, who is going to start working at Company X. Company X has been around for about 15 years. They have a pretty large and complex business domain, lots of interacting departments and code, different product offerings, very dispersed. They've gone through a recent rapid growth phase, which is fueled by their past success, and they're looking to expand their product offerings, but they don't have an onboarding program. So Ben has just been hired by Company X and starting on a team where he's working with one other tenured developer who's been there for a couple of years and another more recent hire who's been there about 6 months. So let's take a step back and ask ourselves, is Ben set up for success at this company? Well, there's lots of legacy code because the company's been around for 15 years, so there might be some issues to deal with there. He was put on a team to work on a new product offering, so that's positive. Maybe we can avoid some of the legacy pitfalls in the code. There's probably some established processes and things at this company as well that he'll have to figure out. There could be some documentation, but it could be difficult to know what the best practices are and where the sources of truth are in that. And with lots of interacting departments, he might struggle to grasp the bigger picture, just being part of this new product development team that's really focused. So let's fast forward now to 3 months in the future for Ben. The tenured developer on his team is leaving. The business has decided to change directions. Ben's been reassigned to a maintenance team where he has no context as to the code he's working on. You can imagine that his job satisfaction is plummeting. Meanwhile, newer developers who are joining the company don't even have their laptops set up. There's kind of some problems. So let's see how that could have gone better in a different scenario. So now I'm going to do another character, main character, Jackie. She's joining Company Y. They similarly are going through a new growth phase, also a large business domain. Before Jackie starts, her manager identifies several small tasks for her to complete in the first week. Company Y also has a new hire onboarding program where new hires attend various sessions led by different leaders in the organization to talk about the product areas, maybe a technical architecture overview, give some history on the culture. And this allows her to meet different people across the company and know who to talk to later. She is also part of an onboarding cohort of other new hires, recent hires, so already built-in camaraderie, and she's also been assigned an onboarding buddy, somebody to help her, and she knows she can always go to ask her questions and get up to speed as she begins. So 3 months into Jackie's tenure there, she completes a survey to give feedback about her process. She's feeling highly productive. She's already delivered impact to the company. In fact, she's mentoring other new hires that she's bringing on board. You can imagine her job satisfaction is increasing, including her confidence. So you're starting to kind of get the idea about how an onboarding program could make a difference as early and as few as the first couple of months. So I want you to reflect back on when you started your new job, whenever that was, and kind of what that experience was like, and thinking about things that you could maybe consider that you might have changed about that experience, or maybe some positive things as well. The next section that I'm going to go through, I'm going to give you some ideas of how you could start an onboarding program at your company or consider making improvements to the existing one. And the key thing here is it doesn't matter what level you're at or what your role is in your company, everybody plays a part and can make a difference. So onboarding is really a team sport. One place to start is to start small. You could choose just one single thing to improve and trying to make it better for the next new hire. This could be documenting something. It might be just a list of people to talk to. It could be about an architectural diagram or a how-to document, or maybe updating a document that you followed when you started. That would also help you. Additionally, you might take a step back and look, what were the biggest pain points? What were the biggest pain points when you started? How could you help the next person that joins to avoid those pain points as well? So, because like I mentioned, onboarding is a team sport, there's multiple groups involved, including HR, IT, if it's a product engineering org, lots of people there. Something I noticed at a prior place that I worked when we were bringing on a lot of new engineers, they didn't have their development environment set up. In fact, it took them several days, weeks to kind of get acclimated and get all the tools that they needed. So it was really painful. I was bringing new people onto my team and they weren't getting the support that they needed. This is what started to motivate me to want to create some sort of better onboarding process there. They were missing different permissions and access. And it was really painful and demoralizing for these engineers to not be able to come in and be effective right away. That is something that's really motivating people and why they usually join new companies. They want to contribute. So I decided to gather a group of people who were involved in the process from hiring up to pre-onboarding and then day one. So we did a little value stream mapping exercise. I had people from HR, IT, sysadmin, engineering, product development in the room, and we kind of laid out all the steps. Some of it was automated. A ticket was created when people were decided to be hired, and that triggered a whole series of other things, their accounts being created, permissions being granted, et cetera, et cetera. But if you missed that first manual step of that ticket creation, the whole thing fell apart. So we looked for ways that we could automate that process and make that a little more seamless. But it even went back even further than that for procuring equipment that needed to be brought in for new hires. So depending on where the pain points are for you, these are things to consider. It was really productive exercise, and it was also great to get all of these groups together in a room to talk about what the breakdown was and where it was occurring, and then start to discuss solutions. The result ultimately was we managed to get new hires set up down from days to hours. It also took a lot of help from the development team, though. In the setup script we had for the very specific development environment, getting multiple contributors, having people provide their support and update that script. Things are always changing, something that needs love on a continuous and ongoing basis, and letting people know that and getting it up to date. So that ended up being a win. So what about taking it to the next level? Let's say there's some small things you've been doing, but you maybe have some more influence or are able to consider stepping it up. This is a path that I went down to get some more buy-in and support. Everyone in the organization was feeling the pain, and they wanted to know how they could help and contribute. Initially, it can be seen as a strain on people's time. There's a lot of people's time that are involved in onboarding, including taking away time from people who are active in development flow to train new people and orient them. But ultimately, the pros outweigh the cons in this example. So we've said, well, let's take an agile approach. We're going to experiment, reflect back on that, iterate and learn. You're probably already using agile in your development process, so hopefully that's an easy sell. Build, measure, learn. So collect some data, create some surveys, find out where the pain points are. Survey engineers, who have felt the pain, or new hires. This is something that we started to do every time we hired new people. Hey, what sucked for you in this process? How would we have made this better? And reflecting on that and going back. If you collect that data, it makes a big impact. Many people like data. It helps drive process forward. So after that proposal, we started to iterate on this. It also, another case to make is that it improves more than just the new hire job satisfaction. Existing employees are looking for growth opportunities, and mentoring can be a big part of that. Moving up from junior to senior level of development as well, in all levels of your organization, getting that opportunity to teach someone else, the best way to learn is to teach, can really lift them up. And from other companies and things that I've seen, there's been really positive feedback from people who were able to contribute in that way and help lift others up. So there's lots of growth and mentoring opportunities for others in the organization. So then there's a few points to consider. It's a bit complex, but I want you to think about as you're thinking about your company and how you can make the improvements. What is the relative complexity of your organization? What are the pain points? Is it the business domain that's really complex and diverse? Is the communication between the different departments the breakdown? Do you need to broker some kind of group that creates more communication between them? Is it the technical architecture? Maybe the legacy code, but we've started to break it out into microservices, but where are the best practices? Where are those documented? And how will people know what the right way to do it is? Also consider the speed of growth of your company. How fast are they growing? And along more on this in a minute, but how frequently are people starting? How many new hires are you onboarding? You know, in the keynote this morning, Rachel said for Guild, they want to add 150 people in the next year. I've heard that from lots of different companies around Denver. That's a lot of people. So considering what you need to have in place to make that successful and possible, you know, if you were able to actually get that many people to sign an acceptance letter, right? It keeps going from that point. So how frequently are you going to have them start? If you're going to create, as I'll talk about a little bit more later, like a boot camp, like making sure you're grouping people into cohorts and creating that foundation for them to build on. So you want these new hire sessions to kind of match, if you're going to create those, the frequency of people starting. Another approach that can help you be more respectful of people's time is to record those sessions. That can be really informative and can save on people's time. Maybe after it's been given live a few times, you can make a recording and then share that. The thing to keep in mind with that is it could go out of date. Like documentation, it goes out of date quickly, so you gotta kind of balance that and consider those things. Getting people up to speed takes time, right? Learning the lay of the land in a new job takes time. I used to tell people at another company I worked for, oh, it's gonna take 6 months till you're gonna feel like you know what's going on. How can you shorten that loop and make them feel like they know what's going on sooner? They're drinking from the fire hose when they start. It's a lot of information to absorb, and you want to ensure that you are setting the right pace for them. Having an onboarding buddy, you know, it's a really awesome program when you do get buy-in from other folks to help you out with that. Reward them and thank them. It is impacting their time, and you want to make sure you're being supportive of that as well. One more note on documentation, you know, you might consider creating a personalized onboarding doc that is providing the relevant links, or maybe you have a Confluence wiki page where you can link new hires to all of the relevant things that they're going to need to know. Frequently asked questions. If it keeps coming up and you keep telling somebody, write it down, share that, and then encourage people who use that documentation to update it, leave it better than they found it as they continue to move on. The main thing, too, I really want to emphasize is that company culture matters. And yes, culture, I feel like, is becoming a much more trendy thing to talk about, and what's your company culture and how well is that instilled? But whether it was intentionally created or it grew organically at your company, it is absolutely going to affect your onboarding. Ideally, you have a strong company culture and you want to make sure that you bring new people into that culture immediately and make them feel a part of it and aware of what it is. So whether you have a session on the history of it or however you transmit your culture to your new hires, it's really important to bring them into the fold. It's also going to impact how knowledge is shared in the organization and what the best approach for creating an onboarding program is for you. If you are a documentation-heavy culture, then having lots of documents and links to those is going to be more valuable than one where it's more speaking related and person-to-person, face-to-face, and maybe the training sessions makes more sense. So you want to think about your culture and how those things relate. Additionally, you have to consider how open to change your culture is when attempting to introduce something new, if this is a new thing for your company. And understanding how the organization works and how best to introduce those kind of things is something that you should deeply consider. I say beware of tribal knowledge. This is, a dangerous thing, especially when you've been at a company a long time. You forget how hard it was to learn the things that you already know. You already know a lot and you're sharing that in a tribal way. Like, can you document that? How else can you share that? How else can you spread that to the new hires and then give them ownership to continue to shape it going forward? The bottom line is that your culture is ultimately going to drive how your onboarding functions, and each company is going to be different, and therefore their onboarding experience is also going to look different. So those are some things to consider rather deeply there. Culture, culture, culture. It also, connects people, right? So figuring out how people are communicating, how they're connecting, if the problems you're solving are interdepartmental, what is the culture that's in place there and how can you work with it? Because more than likely it'll be difficult to change, especially if the company's been around for a while. Now, if you're a newer company and you're starting up and really setting that foundation of your culture, I would say it's important to emphasize this from the beginning. Having a strong culture as a startup it's as you are growing and the more people you add, that culture is going to naturally shift and change. And you want to, be sure that you are including the right mix and the right flow, and that you're guiding those things in the right direction. So a couple examples, and I'll start my slide deck for sure, that we've got here are some boot camps. So here's an example from Home Advisor. They've got a wiki that we created to link. It's got a big, extensive FAQ, links to all the other relevant Confluence documents, and also a hint here about the 2-week boot camp that we created that had 2 weeks worth of those informative sessions. So they were focusing on different product areas, different technology things. There were slightly different tracks for QA versus development, product, BI, marketing. Some of the high-level stuff was history of the company and the culture, and here's an introduction to some of the main people in the company and their little bios, and walking it through that schedule. But also making time for team lunches. We had started there a culture of, on your first week, you go out to lunch with your new team. Getting connected to the people and getting to know them up front is really, really big. Here's another visual from Cockroach Labs. They published this on Twitter of their 2-week boot camp. The things you can really kind of see, well, you can't really see, but that are in here on the Friday parts is they're like, yeah, we have this Flex Friday where people can work from home, and then they repeat that in a week. They're like, yep, we really do that. That's really part of our culture, and they also talked about their Roach Buddies, which was like their onboarding buddy program. We're going to set you up with somebody and make sure you feel really supportive and anchored into the company and the culture. So pages, heavily linked in Confluence might be an approach. Maybe you want to spread your new hire meetings over a couple of months. At Quizlet, that's a process that we do. We kind of space them out, and it's really nice because it kind of paces the intake. It's all up front. Sometimes that can be intense. If you do it all up front, that can be great, but you want to make sure to provide the resources for people to go back later and access information once more of it is sunk in. Okay, yeah, I remember that this person gave this talk, and now I need to go find them again and learn more about that product space. So, totally sped through this. I'll leave some time for questions, but I wanted to just drive home that onboarding is not a one-day thing. It really, it starts on day one, but it continues throughout the whole career of people's tenure at your company, and it translates next into really their employee development and learning and growth beyond that point to where they continue to find growth in your company. Because ultimately it comes down to growth, and if people aren't growing, then they're probably leaving. And giving your company that feedback loop and being able to survey them and find out what their experience was and how they can improve it for going forward is going to help create that cycle that's going to continuously improve your company. And it is a team sport, so make sure you're involving others and crossing the boundaries of communication with that. So I'm going to wrap up here, and then I'll open it up to any questions that you have. Go forth and onboard. Got a couple links in here as well. Thank you.
So I know you mentioned you're new to Quizlet. Did they already have an onboarding process set up, or were you able to kind of do what you were used to and set that up yourself?
So she asked, I'm new to Quizlet. Did they have an onboarding set up before, or did I have to create that? So Quizlet already had some onboarding set up, which is really great. We do the onboarding doc that we create for every individual with lots of links and guidance as to who to meet, who to talk to, some things to accomplish in their first week. I believe it's a fairly new process that we're trying out. And we also have new hire onboarding sessions that we kind of schedule periodically to have people get acclimated in that way. And there's definitely a cohort that you start with, so there's other people that start at the same time. We have our IT guys have an hour where they walk everybody through their laptops and getting those set up and feeling really kind of oriented to the space. Our doc also tells you, here are the Slack channels to join, here's where different things are happening and different things to look out for.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So as a company, we do pretty good in terms of onboarding, but each project we start is really shaky on the onboarding. How do we get the best buy-in to say, hey, we can standardize the process when we start up a new project to get standardized onboarding?
For the project?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's asking what should be the onboarding process for new projects outside of just starting new at the company.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the same considerations apply, thinking about kind of how your information is shared in the culture and how you want to set that up ahead of time, and like, you know, are you detailing it out in documentation, or is it a big kickoff meeting and or anything like that? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that makes sense. So our team doesn't get new members very frequently, so our iteration would be very slow. Do you have like tips for how to still keep like onboarding like relevant and like?
Great question. So she said they're not adding employees very frequently. The feedback loop would be a bit slower, so how to keep onboarding fresh. For that, I would potentially recommend, you know, before you're gonna bring someone new on, like have the brainstorming session about, you know, what's most relevant right now? What are our goals for how quickly we want to get this new person we're bringing up to speed? What kinds of things might they need to know? Who might they need to be connected with? As well as taking in those cultural factors in terms of how things are communicated, but try to think about, and this is hard, the things that you're so used to that you don't even realize. It's kind of like with strengths, you know, you're so good at it, you don't even realize you're doing it. So all of those things and trying to bring those up and set your person up for kind of success there, and give them access to resources when they join right away, so that in real time they know where they can always go to find the answers as they start navigating that path.
So I work for a large organization that I would say doesn't have a consistent onboarding process across divisions. I onboarded somebody last week, he's at some other session, but the quiz or the data gathering kind of spoke to me. Do you have suggestions about like what sort of questions to ask when you hire, and maybe how often?
So the question was the larger company, some recent onboarding being inconsistent, and what might be some of the data collection to do to create new hires in order to improve the process?
Yes.
Capturing. So that was a great question. You can definitely over-survey people, so be careful about that. When we at a former company had kicked off our new boot camp, we were doing daily surveys. Okay, what did you think about today? You know, what did you think about all of this? And we did it every day that week, and it definitely dropped off throughout the week, so you don't want to overdo it either. But I would keep it short, you know, but asking directly, like quick surveys, you know, to kind of grade. Think about the things that you might have questioned when you created it, or things that might be pain points, or what might be working, and where you might want to take it to drive the questions that you asked. So if you're saying, okay, we have this group session and somebody is leading it, you know, what did you think about the speaker, giving the speaker feedback? You know, if they're like, oh, it put me to sleep, I'd rather have hands-on, you know, being open to getting feedback like that and measuring that. Also, even just a pulse check, you know, like, okay, how excited were you on day one? You know, by the end of the week, like, where were you at? You would anticipate them to be a little full and just totally fried, but like, keep measuring that, right? Like, don't always make that assumption. Like, see how you could adjust the process and then experiment and kind of iterate. Would be my suggestion.
Does Quizlet have contractors, and if so, do contractors get the same type of onboarding?
Great question. Quizlet, he asked, does Quizlet have contractors, and do they get the same kind of onboarding? So Quizlet does have contractors. I would say they have a similar, but not completely the same onboarding. Obviously, certain of the sessions, you know, that are for employees only, they're not going to get. We do a lot of the IT-related onboarding for them, and depending on the team that they're joining, may dive more deeply into it. It's probably a lighter weight version, but it's a good call out, like whether or not we're going back to see how effective they're really being by onboarding them. That's a good question.
So I know you have an office like in the Bay, right? San Francisco, and opening the Denver office. How does onboarding work kind of to geographically distributed offices?
So the question was, how do we onboard to geographically
That
has
works.
separate offices.
Big preference.
Yes. So yes, Quizlet, we do have an office in Denver, as well as San Francisco. So we are growing in Denver and starting to take on more of the onboarding within the office solely, but we do have a very strong remote connection to the other office and lots of Google Hangouts and meetings that we're conducting that way. And that's already part of our culture. We're already really well integrated in that way. So a lot of the sessions take place that way, but we also usually are starting people in the San Francisco office for a week and getting them set up at their computer and oriented that way. But we usually send them out for a week at the beginning of their tenure, whether it's their first or second week, just so that they can kind of get exposed to the culture there and then know like the translation here. So it's almost kind of like 2 weeks of onboarding, one in Denver, one in San Francisco, and we've got some people here who can tell you all about that experience that they went through, the differences. So I think we should, yeah. Yes, here.
All right. So where do you find that you have the most challenges with onboarding? Would it be in the HR paperwork space, in the tech, IT, and account setup, or is it more in kind of the culture and processes?
So the question was in which department are the onboarding challenges the biggest, HR, IT, or in the culture and processes? I think it really varies by company, so at Quizlet versus former companies I worked at, the challenges were different, and it just depended on the differences in the company structure and like how much had been automated. Like as much as you can automate, you want to, but then making sure that the boundary lines between groups and the handoff points are really like strong and connected and clear. So if anywhere, I would probably say in those handoffs, because everyone's like really great to own their section, but then, that's somebody else's job. And if you're, if that handoff isn't strong, that's gonna be an easy place to find pain points.
What about some random one-off events like an acquisition where you've now got 100 people just show up on one day and they were in one company and now they're in another company? How do you handle that on either side of the fence? That
is a great question. So he asked, how do you handle an acquisition where 100 people just show up on that one day? If it were me, so I haven't explicitly experienced that, but if it were me approaching that scenario and knew that was coming, I would attempt to set up some kind of onboarding transitional thing, depending on, which company kind of they were being absorbed into, but definitely taking the time to take a step back and make them feel a part of the culture and integrate them and let them know, hey, here's how we've been doing it. And if you're open to changing how you're doing it, like creating that open space for them to have their input, and maybe you can even take the best of both worlds and end up with a new culture. I know that's not always how it happens with acquisitions. Sometimes it's like, now you just have to do it our way, and is that always the best way? So challenging that as much as you can to create more of an inclusive mix in that. But I would follow some of the same processes of sharing your documentation and like sharing that background story and information for people, to understand that whole picture and be able to move forward and be a quick contributor.
I was just recently onboarded onto sort of a smaller startup of about 20 people, and things are changing at a really quick pace, and so it's been really hard to get people to kind of slow down and either document things or do a little bit of knowledge transfer, just because things are going to be different like a week from now. Do you have any advice for onboarding people into an environment like that?
Great question. So the question was, smaller company, things are moving really fast in a startup culture. How do you keep up with the changing of pace, right? Documentation is going to be harder in that case, right? Because they're changing so fast, it's like driving the new car off the lot, it's immediately different, right? It's 100% different. So I think there it's about establishing, what the culture of knowledge sharing you want to be going forward, and calling it out more explicitly and making it really clear to everyone, okay, this is the process now, working through changing it, or this is the product now, it's going to change, like, talk with others about how you're going to communicate those changes, and maybe finding lightweight documentation ways or history tracking, because some of that history of how things changed could be important going forward as well. And so, but finding the most lightweight solution for that. So, you know, if you're using Slack and so my husband just started a new company and they use Slack in maybe a way that was also intended to be a searchable log of all history, and he was told, hey, you can search for anything, any of your questions, and you'll find it there. And so that's where the action is happening, and he's been able to get a lot of questions answered that way. So figuring out where the communication is happening right now and trying to get it recorded somehow. It could even be, but basically attempting to create some semblance of a paper trail so that later people can kind of read that and have a little ramp up to orient themselves to where things are now. Thank you. You're welcome.
So I'm kind of a slightly earlier even than that startup right now, where we're about to hire our first employee in the next month. And so we have no onboarding process whatsoever, nothing, starting from ground zero. And obviously in the future, we do intend to continue to grow and hire more people. So I'm kind of concerned with what are the most important foundational pieces to have when designing an onboarding process from scratch. And obviously things are going to get lost in the shuffle and things are going to move super fast. So in your opinion, what is kind of the best way to approach that?
Great, so the question was, what's the best way to approach brand new, just starting out a company onboarding and creating that process from the ground up? Start small. I think it's going to change over time and grow, and focus on, again, going back to what is the goal that you want their output to be at what time. Think ahead to what do you want this person to be thinking about doing in 3 months and in 6 months? What do you want the team to look like and be like? And then think about the needs of all the people that you're going to build in that time and what's going to be most important for them to meet. Like having a development environment setup script may not be it, right? It may, and history of the company, if it's short, that may not be it either. But it could just be, context, other context that you can kind of provide and start building that history. And then also thinking about your culture and how you want to shape that going forward, and making sure that everyone that you bring on board is aware of that and can continue to spread that, because it will grow on its own even if you don't pay attention. So
Awesome, thank you so much.
you're welcome. These have been great questions. Right there.
So we found that in our onboarding that folks are usually able to get set up pretty quickly. They're able to understand the product that we have very quickly. And we refer them to our admin guide. We have this complicated product, to say the least. And so we at least ask them to at least skim through it so they understand the complexity of it. Because it's really, you can't sit down and understand the whole code base in one day. It's just, or even a week or a month even. It's just not possible. So what we found a lot of times that people, when they implement features and things like that, they're not cognizant of all the other factors taken into play. Is this something that could be addressed by some sort of onboarding, or is it more of like a hands-on workshop kind of thing? Like, what kind of things would you think could be applied to be successful so that these folks keep in mind things as they come in?
So the question was, it's quick for them to get set up and understand the product offerings, but the code is really complex and hard to wrap their minds around, and making changes in one area, they're not realizing the impacts it makes kind of across the stack. Is that? I think in that case, you might need to beef up the culture around changes to the code and like feature description and having more of that context filled in, tying it back to what the change is meant to do and how and what the impact of that is, and making that really explicit every time, and that help from product or other areas who can help provide some of that why.
Okay, so it's more in terms of you're better understanding what change you're about to make.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. I think it's kind of like when you add a new person to the company, you're going to be making a change to the company, and so when thinking about onboarding, you kind of have to think a little bit into the future of the impact that you want them to make. Because if you make it intentional, then it will more likely go the way you want, versus not thinking about it and it can take any path. So trying to create like that kind of cultural setup where you interact it in that way.
It's more focused, giving them more focused work and knowing what their scope is and then expanding over.
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, it could also be like needing to move people around more across more parts of it so they get more of that exposure and then they'll think about the impact to it. Like an experience I had at another company when I was doing development was I was really fortunate to get to move around to different groups, which wasn't a common thing, but it gave me a lot of context to how my changes over here would impact those other things, where other groups, when they were siloed, they were like, oh, all these people's changes are always impacting us, but they don't know. So if you were able to actually like move people around through more of it, and you could do that in an onboarding way where, you know, this could be accomplished with ride-alongs, you know, if you have that customer support element in your business, or really just like exposing people to things, even though they won't ever be doing that, just exposing them to what that person's job looks like, you know, or that different part of the code base and what that's impacting. So, is that helpful?
Yeah, it is. I think maybe we're experiencing sometimes a risk of having too much documentation. People just get fatigued by it. So it's just like, okay, I spent a week with it, like, what am I writing? How am I applying?
Yes, documentation fatigue is a thing. It's hard because it's hard to know when it does go out of date or not. I know another approach is like setting up, you know, a documentation curation process. Maybe there's something you can automate that will flag like, hey, this hasn't been updated in a long time. Maybe somebody who knows about this area should review and delete it. You know, it's like cleaning up dead code. Like if you don't ever clean up dead code, it's going to weigh your code base down. It's going to tax the time of your development environment and your developers. So considering how you can automate that, I think it's a big challenge, and I look forward to the next talk someone gives about a solution on that. So I think it's a pretty big and common problem. Great. Any other questions? This has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming and bearing with me through lunch, and I will see you around.